Hello, folks, and welcome to Kudlow. I'm Larry Kudlow. So we begin tonight with a familiar phrase: save America, kill the bill. Back-to-back inflation numbers, 9.1% CPI, 11.3% PPI. You do not want to spend another $1 trillion that would steepen an inflation rate that is already out of control. Anybody that votes for more social or climate spending should seriously have their head examined. And remember, history shows that high inflation always leads to recession. This time will be no different in my view. I believe we're already on the front end of a recession right now. So anybody who votes for a $1 trillion tax hike should have their head examined. It will only deepen the inevitable recession. And that brings me to an issue that cropped up last night on the show. Senator Manchin had been quoted as suggesting that the proposed tax increase on LLC Subchapter S pass-throughs would be nothing more than closing a FICA loophole. Kevin Brady strongly suggested that was not the case, and that Mr. Manchin was referring to the net investment tax, which was no loophole, but instead would have increased the small business tax rate by 3.8%. That would be a devastating blow to the most important sector of the economy. So I did some research. Mr. Kevin Brady is completely right, and Mr. Joe Manchin is wrong. When the net investment income tax was created as part of Obamacare, it was meant to apply to investment income only. The business income of small individually and family-owned firms was specifically exempted. The exemption was intentional. Moreover, the net investment tax does not fund Medicare. It was originally adopted as part of a reconciliation bill, and therefore attributing the funds of this tax to the Medicare Hospital Insurance Trust Fund would have amounted to a double counting of the same revenues. That is, counted once as deficit reduction and then a second time as a means of HI spending. Well, you can't do that. It's a gimmick. It violates the Byrd Rule. So Mr. Manchin and Mr. Schumer are confusing and conflating in order to somehow sell this net investment tax as simply a way of funding Medicare. But it is not true. A general revenue is a general revenue. It could be used for food stamps or welfare or housing or any other discretionary spending. As I say, in order to sell bad policy, this is just phony baloney. Expanding the 3.8% net investment income tax is an 11% increase in the tax rate proposed on family-owned businesses. But there's more, because the Manchin-Schumer proposal would also limit the ability of small businesses to fully deduct their losses during an economic downturn, for example, by extending the so-called excess business loss limitation for non-corporate taxpayers. Now, there's another very dumb idea. You know, C-Corps are permitted to deduct losses. Why shouldn't S-Corps? And in a note to House and Senate leaders, a couple of hundred business groups have pointed out that the combination of expanding the 3.8% net investment tax and imposing strict limits on small business loss deductions would increase the small business tax burden by more than $400 billion over 10 years. This would be a bone-crushing tax hike. NFIB small business confidence has already been plunging. The small business sector has lost employment in 3 of the last 4 months. This, by the way, is illustrated by declines in household employment, from which the national unemployment rate is derived. Big company payrolls have been rising, but the small business jobs have been falling. If you know that, and you know that the Fed's going to have to crunch down on double-digit inflation, then why would you slam a huge tax hike on the small business sector? There are lots of other bad tax ideas in this proposed reconciliation package, including a 15% minimum corporate tax on book profits, which would really wipe out immediate expensing and other legal credits and deductions that are used for IRS profits. All this is the worst imaginable economic policy at a time of great crisis. If the Congress had any brains at all, they would be cutting taxes. They would be deregulating business and energy across the board. They would be freezing domestic spending. Those kinds of pro-growth supply-side approaches might mitigate the economic cost of the Fed's inflation fight. But the left wing of the Democratic Party will not give in. The Bidens' woke, progressive, modern monetary theory that took apart a perfectly good economy in just 18 months, well, they're at it again. They won't listen to advice. They're in denial about the situation. They ignore the numbers. And they've managed to not only take down the economy, but to alienate virtually the entire country. You know what? In the words of Oliver Cromwell to the British Parliament in 1653, and I quote, "In the name of God, go." So permit me an update. Save America. Kill the bill.